customers want results. They don't want attempts. Sometimes somebody just needs like a dashboard to see how many customers do I get, what percentage of them buy this, what percentage of them buy that. I mean, they just need that one-time job. They don't need to hire a team. I joined a startup company as the founding engineer in December, January, February, and then I got laid off. I don't know. It's like in movies, right?
Yeah.
Like you come home.
We have a child on the way.
Your pregnant wife is like sitting on the couch. I'm like, honey, I lost my job.
No.
What are we gonna do? So I'm Ben. I've been working in data and machine learning now for almost a decade. And I've worked in a couple of different companies doing that, in publicly traded companies and startups. And most recently, a couple of years ago, I started my kind of entrepreneurship journey where I started with creating content. I read a blog. I started with doing some freelancing in data science and just software engineering. And yeah, in the past year, that was going well enough for me to kind of take the leap to formalize that in the past. And so this year, I started my data consultancy, Beyond Data Consulting. I published a course on O'Reilly for Polars. It's relatively new, Python data frame library, or not just for Python, but that's how I use it. Just building my consultancy. That's kind of become my primary venture these days.
And O'Reilly, I thought this is like a book.
They have books. I think, right? I'd have to double check. I think they have 3 types of media. There's books, there's video courses, like pre-recorded courses, and there's live courses. So my course is a pre-recorded video course.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
How come you chose O'Reilly as a platform compared to like Udemy or I don't know what other platforms people choose nowadays?
They found me. And this is actually...
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was nice. Well, it's also kicking it back to one of your recent guests, Shaw. Shaw had me on the Data Entrepreneurs to talk about pandas versus polars. And that was already a year or two ago, a year and a half ago, maybe. And put that on YouTube. And it was by virtue of that being on YouTube that, my face kind of landed on the screen of the relevant power that be at O'Reilly. And that then they reached out to me. So that's more of a thanks to Shaw, actually, for making an awesome community.
That is so cool. Yeah. I also came across Shaw from his amazing videos, and he's so approachable as well. Just like you contact him and we decided to do an episode. But also part of why he's doing this, he said, because it brings him also joy when his guests also get opportunities like that. And it also excites me when doing videos and putting them on YouTube to hear also such success stories. So congratulations for you. That's super exciting. You wouldn't think that people from O'Reilly are watching YouTube videos or like executives and stuff like this, but apparently, yes. He said he said most of his clients, for example, when he did consultancy, came from YouTube. So that was something that is really interesting that he thought. Maybe going back to your journey, how was the journey? Why did you decide, first of all, to go to the whole consultancy mode and build your own company?
So I decided to go full-time entrepreneurship maybe back in March. At the beginning, I kind of said to myself that there's a number of different ways that I, as a data person, can make money on the internet. There's like a venture, like a VC-backed startup. There's some sort of indie product that I can create and market myself. There's freelancing in data science, machine learning, data engineering, AI, whatever it is. And then there's content creation, which is blogs, YouTube, podcast, course creation, any of that kind of stuff. So I kind of drew out that these are the 4 categories. There's this funny thing where if you're being a disciplined investor of assets, of like money, then it really rewards diversification. But when it comes to time, somehow time is a little bit different. I think it rewards focus. It doesn't reward diversification as much. But there's still a time somehow for diversification and focus. So what I've seen people do, and what I had seen people do, was they're like, oh, I just did a bunch of stuff, and then I basically just followed the money. So I kept my time diversified until something revealed itself as the cash. And that's kind of what happened to me. Currently, I'm working on a startup venture, which is kind of a side venture at this point. And I also am doing content creation very, very slowly, though at the beginning of the year, it was obviously more. I tried some small products, which partially kind of flopped and partially I didn't really have. But yeah, freelancing was just working well for me. I kept getting returning customers. One of the metrics from the year I'm probably most proud of is that 70% of my customers have come back for follow-on work, which is great because sometimes it's been like, oh, the project was just scoped very small. And sometimes it's been like, oh, the thing you built for us makes us realize that now we want all these other analytics too. So just kind of giving these almost intangible like growth and or dimension to the company, that's really rewarding. So that was freelancing. And then I did that for a couple of months. And then a few months after that, I kind of formalized it into a consultancy, which, I start to hire out some of the projects, some of the actual delivery to other engineers and, start to focus more on branding, on marketing, on generating a reliable sales pipeline or lead generation pipeline, whatever you want to call it. And that's where I am today. It's like my primary thing now. And I've just kind of have my probably 10, 20% of my hands in the other pots.
So when you started, maybe let me rephrase what I understood. When you started with your journey, it was like you're doing the development, you're actually doing the projects that you're getting, whether that is, from what I understood from you, is like more data analytics. So you build dashboards, you're building maybe data pipelines. Maybe you can also tell us about like what kind of projects you're getting right after. And then you decide to write the company and like start a company basically that your main focus is actually getting the clients. So you're doing more the sales, the marketing, this kind of aspect of it. And then you let the implementation to be done by somebody else. Did I understand this correctly?
Generally, yeah, your understanding is correct. I mean, I'm still doing a lot of the delivery. I'm just starting now to really focus on the sales and market. Oh, so you asked a few questions there. You asked, I'm doing analytics and dashboards, so this is how it got started. So now I'm focusing on sales and marketing and hire out the delivery. So answering that in order, it's mostly like custom analytics stuff. It's mostly custom analytics. It's been interesting that process as well, just the process of niching down customers, because at the beginning of freelancing, I don't know what other people's experiences are, but I just took any work that came. That would have been any sort of software engineering, some sort of like machine learning proof of concepts for established tech companies. There was some data warehouse, like create data, like help us put all our stuff in the data warehouse, just like basic BI stuff. Then there was some stuff which is like, we need some super custom front end analytics tool that no dashboard is really supporting, along with the data pipeline to feed into that and everything. But yeah, starting to niche down into that kind of like custom analytics category. To your point about, am I focusing now on sales and marketing and hiring out the delivery? It's a process, right? Like I still do a lot of the delivery. I'm just starting now to focus more on sales and marketing. From what I've seen, I forget what the guy's name is. He's like some business influencer on Instagram. And he said this thing, there's a few pieces of like institutional wisdom here that I try to follow. The first one is that build a business that you can sell and it'll be a business that you want to keep. Basically, it should just be easy and automated and you should be totally replaceable. And that will be a business that you can sell, but it will also then be so easy that why would you want to get rid of it? But on the journey there, this other guy, and that's David C. Baker, he says that. But there's the other guy, this business influencer I saw on Instagram recently, he's saying, in the process to automate a business, first you go bottom up. First, you start with administration, like emails. The next step is the delivery of the work. The next step above that is the marketing. The next step above that is sales. And the next step is leadership. If you can kind of replace all that stuff, I think obviously it's on a case-by-case basis. Like in data consultancy, there's not so much admin I have to do. The main thing is the delivery. So I'm chipping into the delivery, I would say. And the more delivery I can take off my plate, the more I can focus on the marketing. And then once I'm not doing any delivery anymore, then, it's a process of automation as far as I can see.
This is very interesting. If you remember maybe the journey so far, I would like maybe to have, let's say somebody's now trying to enter this journey and would like to see what things to be expected and what milestones need to be passed. So if you remember, maybe in the early days, let's start with clients, for example. Like, a lot of the questions that people get is like, how did you find your first client? Was it through network? Was it through Upwork? A lot of people also use that platform to find clients. What was your experience like?
Well, there's two questions there, right? The first question is, what's the first step onto this journey? And the second question is, how do you find clients when you're getting started? My first client came from Upwork. Honestly, it's been so good to me. A lot of my clients came from there. I think it can be a crutch if you lean on it. You want to get to a place where clients are finding you, but just to get started, it's awesome.
And how did you decide to maybe focus more on data analytics versus, for example, data science? Because from what I understood, you also had data science background, right?
Yeah, my background is data science, and that's been most of my professional career. I think it's mostly the types of deals, the types of the businesses I wanted to help, the types of things I wanted to deliver. Consulting companies take up a interesting place. Small consultancies like mine take up an interesting place in the tech market, in my opinion, where there are companies or there are businesses out there doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I actually, that's one thing that I've been blown away by just by doing this work this past year is just how many different ways people are making money out there. There are industries I never heard of. I'm like just like middlemen here. Yeah, just it's crazy. It's super cool. But there's a lot of these like small to medium sized businesses, 10 to 100 people who know and they see online and they see in videos what value their data can add to their business. And they don't have the wisdom, not the wisdom, but they don't have the technical know-how or even it's just assimilation. They don't have the assimilatedness or the knowledge to hire some team of tech people, nor would they, right? A lot of the time they won't need something that's like, permanent, it's like in a constant state of flux. It's always changing. It's always improving. Sometimes somebody just needs like a dashboard, to see how many customers do I get, what percentage of them buy this, what percentage of them buy that. It's something super simple. I mean, they just need that one-time job. They don't need to hire a team. So that's, I think, where consulting companies like mine really come in. And so for that, I think that analytics, such a good product offering. This is just looking back on my experience. I think that analytics is such a good instance of this because it's really like product almost to get somebody up and running. And so analytics, you're setting up some data storage, some data pipelines, some data warehouse, whatever it is. And that enables a lot of other use cases, that's what I'm finding, right? That's where some of the returning customers are coming in. They're like, oh, I want to do now this other stuff with the data. But now if you wanted to do something like data science consulting or machine learning consulting, it's a lot less straightforward to me what exactly that is or who that's exactly for. The data science consulting work I have done has been for already established tech organizations, mostly. And that's a totally good option that you can come in, do some proof of concept and see if something's going to work and then, take something to deployment or something like that. But there's also this weird piece of with data science, you're selling experiments, which customers want results. They don't want attempts to get results. So I think with data science, it's really hard to sell outcomes. This answer is becoming more scattered than I thought, but I think analytics is just such an obvious value add to a business. And the customer base for analytics, I think, is much broader than I think data science. Data science requires companies to have already certain stuff in place, and it requires them to already be open to experimentation. And data science isn't cheap. So they have to be willing to spend like a couple $1,000s, a couple tens of dollars even just to see if something works. And yeah, so I think it's a harder customer base. I think it's a harder sell. So it just doesn't lend itself that well to me.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. So when I also started my journey on Upwork, maybe a couple of years ago, I didn't niche down back then. I was just, as you said, like curious, try everything, experiment with different kind of domains, what service offerings you can do. I also come from data science background originally. When I look at the descriptions for these early projects, also the confidence to deliver is not as high because, as you said, everything's an experiment. And when you're trying to sell yourself every time, you kind of tend to sell outcomes to tell them like, okay, I can deliver this within a month. But if something is very experimental in nature, I always felt very anxious to apply for any of these Upwork projects because I didn't even know if it's going to work because there's so many uncertainties. As you said, like the company might not have certain data infrastructure in place, or their data is not of a high quality enough. And these kind of concepts are really hard to explain to stakeholders or explain to your like clients. It could work in a big corporate because they kind of used to this, or maybe they have a data science domain. They have heard like, okay, we have problems with our data quality. But if you're working with small businesses, which was my initial target niche, this is very hard. They want something to see like, okay, we spent, I don't know, all this money on this freelancer or agency. We have nothing to show off because maybe the experiment failed. So naturally, I pivoted into another area, which is not really my original strength, which is to build the infrastructure. It was more like a DevOps role where a startup would come and I would build the whole infrastructure they needed to support their data science solutions, which might come maybe a little bit later. And with that, because you do it multiple times, it's kind of like similar work, you feel more confident to deliver, and then you can also estimate time even better. And also, funny enough, when I was looking at the different project scopes, I saw data analytics, which I also didn't realize before how powerful and needed it was. I knew like, okay, data analysts, data analytics are very important in businesses. It's just, I didn't even see that, okay, now you can actually package it in such a nice service offerings. And then I was actually considering moving to data analytics at some point, which then I decided to go more the engineering route and MLOps kind of route. But I totally agree with what you just said regarding having something that is packaged in a way that could be delivered in a month, and then maybe the customer can come back. And then it's also very interesting to build something way in the beginning. Like you're kind of also focused on infrastructure because you enable other use cases with your offering. So that's also super smart because the clients can then come back at you with more work in the future. Very, very interesting. Was there maybe, if you remember back at the initial stage, was the pricing of these projects something that you encountered? Or I know Upwork, sometimes the clients come up with a budget, or you can kind of see how much they're willing to spend. Did you spend a lot of time thinking about how much to price your services, or got into this dilemma?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for sharing a bit about what your background and what you're doing. It's super interesting. Maybe we can flip the script in a couple minutes. I'd love to hear, because it seems like we started in similar places, but just kind of went to these different, almost infrastructural service offerings roles. And I would also add to that, the other piece was that I think doing MLOps is also super high value add. And yeah, startups is a great customer base, but that's also farther from my personal expertise. So while I'm doing a lot of the delivery at the beginning, analytics, I know everything I need to know to do the delivery myself. That was nice. Was that for you? Were you just like very familiar with ML ops from your work in data science?
So at the moment, yes, I slowly transitioned from a typical data science working in notebooks, to actually building pipelines, which was my first encounter with MLOps. So something, for example, using Vertex AI on GCP, building just the training pipeline, the data generation pipeline, and then exposing these models somewhere in the API, and then other heavy engineers will pick it up and put it into the API, package it, maybe Kubernetes or something, whatever technology they're using. We use Kubernetes, for example. And slowly I noticed like, okay, the problem at my company was the moment you build the model, there was no much work needed to be done because the company was so big and the use cases weren't flowing as quickly as possible. So as a data scientist, the moment you finish building the model, sometimes you had to wait for the engineers to kind of finish the wrapper around it, which is like the API, which took so much time. I naturally found myself just waiting until I get a new use case, or until I can do an A/B testing, or I can maybe add some features to this model. And I was like, okay, well, let me maybe help doing the API work and see what that is about. And then I realized, okay, that work means you need to build the infrastructure, the virtual machines. You need to also write the code for the API, whether it's Python or other languages. And not only that, but you need to host it on some hosting. So you can do serverless on Google Cloud, or you can go really deep with Kubernetes. Our use case, we have a recommendation engine. So we're having a lot of requests, almost like 1 million per week. So you need something really scalable, something that's really reliable as well. So I started getting into that area, and I realized, okay, these expertise are actually very much needed in a lot of different companies, especially also companies who cannot afford Kubernetes clusters because they are quite expensive. So I decided to maybe do an offering where I can set up your whole infrastructure using Terraform, which is this infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I decided to do that as like a quick startup package setup, which turned out to be quite interesting because it solves a lot of pain for startups, because usually they also have data scientists who don't have much expertise in that. I decided to specialize in this and a little bit of security, just so they are compliant whenever they have new clients. And this has been quite interesting service offering. It's a little bit different than what I do. But the more I do it, the more confident I feel that I can deliver it. So now I'm kind of specialized in that. Also deployment and pipelining. I don't write machine learning code anymore, like the actual recommender engine. I don't do that anymore. I just package it, build the pipeline around it, and deliver it. You can say more like, like an MLOps, DevOps kind of role, which I find interesting, but I still like to get my hands dirty developing the modeling. Sorry, that was a big turnaround into the actual
it's awesome. It's awesome to hear. Super cool. So you have this service offering on your website somewhere where people can just come and check it out.
Yes.
And amazing.
So I made
That's great.
a simple personal website with the service offering, and I hosted it on GitHub Actions, like GitHub pages. So it's not really like also commercial website. That was like the initial kind of icebreaker so people find out what I do. But I also going through the content route. So I'm hoping through LinkedIn to provide content that is high value that people would also come. Also, you can think maybe of this podcast as part of it, also as like customer acquisition, if you can provide enough value. I really like what you said in the beginning. Like you tried so many different things until you landed the one that generate the big bucks. At the moment, I'm also spread so thin around so many different channels, trying so many different things. For me, I'm trying to see what I found most fun and I find like passion through. So the podcast has been very interesting. I'm really passionate about it. I didn't like the editing, so I had to delegate to someone else because otherwise I wouldn't have continued. I did write on Medium, for example, experimented with that. It went very well last year. It was just too time consuming and too unpredictable. So I also decided to stop. I couldn't find my passion through it. So right now, LinkedIn, content and podcasting and freelancing.
Amazing.
We'll see what works. We'll see what works.
Great. And I think the benefit of content is no matter what it is, and then this is like also an answer to people who are like, how do I start? There's always this thing when you're going to, do content creation. It's like, well, what should I create? Well, what's going to generate the opportunities that I want to have? Do I want to do sort of like entrepreneur journey stuff, which is, it's going to maybe then it's going to lead me into creating some sort of course for other aspiring entrepreneurs, or should I create content about like AI business use cases so that's actually going to get maybe client opportunities? But the thing is that if you're just talking about this industry online in any capacity, it just adds, like anything, just adds social proof. And I think that's so nice about the podcast, and that's awesome that you're doing it on YouTube as well, is because people just love seeing talking face on the internet. It just it just adds, not joking, it adds so much trust. You can have like 40,000 followers on your blog and your newsletter, but I think that there's something really powerful about just having a couple of YouTube videos out there. I would like to do that. I would like to do that.
I think you should. It's super fun. I have to say, it's super, super fun. The thing is, why I'm doing this, I'm now specifically sending messages to people who are doing a lot of stuff, for example, on LinkedIn. More people who are like big on blogging, especially on LinkedIn or Medium, because they've never been on a podcast. And they get so surprised to say like, like you have, I don't know, like 100,000 followers or 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is quite big. Like people don't get so many followers on LinkedIn. And I tell them like, let's do a podcast, because you get a totally different view when you see that person on a video, because you get to know this person, you get to know their voice. Some people, I was so surprised to, for example, previous guests, like I've been talking to this guy, following his content for so long, and he turned out to have a French accent. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I would have never thought. And like, he's a great guy. And like, you see the personality from a different lens. So this is the thing that is driving me. Like I'm meeting so many amazing people beyond their content. So similar to your beyond data consulting. So it's also beyond their content. You can see the personality.
Beyond.
I agree.
Beyond the blog. That's a cool name. beyond the bug, we couldn't name for a podcast.
That is true, actually. Yeah.
Curious to ask you one more question, actually. How are you handling, because this is something I'm beginning to encounter, how are you handling maintenance? Because for me, that's a question I get asked during my contracts. And I've kind of come up with, pretty fixed approaches. Obviously, if you're doing like fixed pricing or even pricing, even if it's hourly or some sort of retainer, the work ends, the building ends. The client always wants to know, if this breaks in some way, are you going to be around to help me out? And not just that, some clients don't care. Sometimes you can offboard and you really do like a great job of the handover. Actually, maybe for you more than for me, in the organizations that you work with, there are probably people that you can hand over your stuff to meaningfully. That's a bit harder for me because with analytics, nobody's writing any more code, right? Like these aren't people who know anything about code in many cases. How are you handling that?
Depends on the situation. So if somebody has a tech team and I'm doing like an offload to the tech team, I usually work very closely with CTOs, and whatever I build, I onboard them on what I built on the exact code. I was like, here's what you need, here's what happens. And I also offer them like a capacity where I say, like, if something happens after, like sometimes, for example, bugs come up that the CTO cannot solve by himself. So he reach out and he's like, hey, I really need some help. And then I jump in, I allocate some time for them. Like obviously you get paid for these hours, or you can do like the retainer, which is like what some people do. Like you assign a retainer with like, okay, if this is important, like in production, something that is really might go wrong and they don't have like the team at the moment or the resources, because some clients, for example, they bootstrapping. So they're paying me from their own pocket. And obviously you don't want to keep paying like a freelancer or an agency. So retainer might be interesting, or I usually so far, the things that I've built, they are stable until you maybe need to add some more features or expand stuff to it if they don't have the capability to do so. At the moment, I don't have so many clients that I'm like, okay, sorry, like I don't have time for you. I can just jump in and fix whatever they need. But as you said, I'm try to usually make a very good offboarding, very good documentation that they can hand it by themselves in case something goes wrong. Not in case something goes wrong, but in case they want to expand on it. If something goes totally wrong, like, I don't know, lately we had some weird bugs that the CTO couldn't handle. So he had to like talk with me. It's like, can you please jump and see what's going on? And sometimes you just need somebody to talk to, like he figured it out himself, what was the issue. But just the fact that you're talking to someone is just like, we have this term like the rubber duck usually in software development. It just helps. It definitely helps. This is what I'm currently trying to do. I mean, I cannot take so many clients at the moment. I'm also thinking about expanding similar to you, opening like an agency and doing like a Gen AI POC development and all this kind of stuff. It's just a big step. I don't know. Like, what were you doing before you started the agency? Did you also were doing something like an entrepreneurial, or did you have a full-time job or what?
Yeah, I was working, different tech companies up until the end of February this year. And I worked in Delivery Hero in Berlin until almost a year ago. I worked there 3.5 years or something. Yeah, from July 2020 until November of 2023. And then I went to a small startup. And then after that, I left there in March of 2024. At the beginning of March. So I had been doing freelancing on and off actually for the years leading up into that, and doing content creation as well. And then I just started doing freelancing pretty much full. Well, like I said at the beginning, it was like part-time with a bunch of other stuff. And then the agency kind of emerged. I wanted kind of the protections and the benefits that a business offers. And
you mean a legal protection, or
the legal protection that a business offers? Yeah, I think at least coming from the US, I'm always, what is it? The land of the free and the home of the liability. People sue like crazy here. If somebody is making business decisions based on something I've done and I made a mistake, or not even if I made a mistake, but if they can claim that my thing gave them an incorrect insights, I don't know. You just got to cover your ass, basically. After a couple contracts where I felt like they were somehow more like critical to the business itself, that's when I was like, okay, I really want this like protection of an LLC and some like business insurance. And that's when I formalized it in that way. And then it's also nice, like the branding is also nice now. Like I don't sign contracts as Ben Feifke. I sign contracts as, Beyond Data Consulting, and my email address and all that stuff. Yeah, it just kind of happened, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. It comes across also super professional. I've been working with a marketing agency. They do like an outreach campaigns and stuff like this. And they said like, yeah, it really helps if you're reaching out using a name of a company, because it just come across different. And the legal liability is something also very attractive and made me also think about so many times, especially if you're working as like a solo contractor or a freelancer. These things, like in the beginning, you don't even think about. And then once you actually think about it, it's like, oh, okay, that's personally liable for whatever you're doing. So that's super scary. But the third thing that actually, when there's something I also didn't know. If you're in a contract with a company building them something, depending on the contract, but usually the default is you're not allowed to subcontract whatever you're trying to do. So in your case, I heard about this LinkedIn post you did where you hired somebody to build like this very nice graph that turned out to be, according to your words, like even better than what you did, but like also like same cost, same everything, which I would also do the same thing. That's why I hired like an editor, because he's way better than me. And then he saved me so much time. And these things you're kind of not allowed to do if you're only freelancing, depending on the company, or you need to make a case like, why are you doing that? But if you're a company, that's like the default. Like you can do whatever you want. The contract is with you, and then whoever does the work, you're responsible for.
Interesting. I don't know. So this is also, we're getting into a totally new topic here, which is cool. And I've been loving it because I've been learning a lot about this year, but it's the topic of German versus American, like taxes and and employment laws. I don't think that that's the case in the US. If you're in the US, if you're a sole proprietorship, I think you can just subcontract. It's just a business expense. And maybe in Germany, they're a bit more, well, Germany's stuck up about everything when it comes to like labor laws. I'm not familiar with this, but I take your word for it. I think you could just basically hire somebody and it's like a business expense, especially for something like the editing, which isn't necessarily have anything to do with any particular work contract or client delivery that you're doing, right?
No, you could do it. So my client is actually US based, and the contract they did with me, in that contract it says I'm not allowed to do it. But from me, for taxes reasons, of course I can hire whoever I want.
Oh, so they put it in the contract with you that you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so that seems like contract specific. That doesn't seem like it's a legal. Why do they do that?
I don't know.
I've never heard of that.
I thought that was the default, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
I guess because you also sign like an NDA, and especially if it's like startup trying to build a product, so I had to sign an NDA and all this kind of stuff. So maybe just part of it. I would assume if I'm hiring you, Ben, I don't want Ben to be sending my stuff or sharing my code with 10 other people, So maybe it makes sense from that perspective.
NDAs are such a funny thing, man.
Yeah.
They're just like, I think this is a funny thing of working with small, medium-sized businesses.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just copy paste stuff from the internet. I've received some whack NDAs, and I would show them to like my dad or my brother or something, both of whom run their own businesses. And they'd say, this is crazy. Like, you should walk away from this. And I'm like, I don't know. And I just like, in one case, I like respond to the client. I was like, this NDA does not work for me because of this, that, and this. I like, and he's like, hang on, let me take a look. And it turned out in that case, like one of his colleagues had just literally taken something off the internet and sent it over to me. And he just basically took a new thing off the internet that was more generous and sent that to me. So you can really question this. You can really question this stuff. In this particular case, yeah, this is a real benefit of like, if you're doing it as a brand, maybe it forces the question. I mean, because I raised the topic of NDAs because I had an NDA once, which was like, it put in there that Beyond Data Consulting is responsible, that the same terms of this NDA are held with the other people of the organization. So basically, just Beyond Data Consulting has to sign the NDA, and then Beyond Data Consulting has to sign a similar contract with the people who work for it or are working on the engagement that, has the same like protections in place. So yeah, I don't know. Man, case by case basis, I guess. But that seems funny that the startup would even want that. But anyway, I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think like with this role, as you said, like every case is different. But then I also have like some mentors in this space, people who build companies for like, they have like 40 people and they've seen everything. So they tell me so many horrific stories, but they tell me not to worry about because I'm still like a small fish. So bigger problems comes to bigger fishes. Stuff like people, which is something you need to actually be very careful about, especially if you're working with somebody that they have, I don't know, visa or something, that they could retract the payments up to 6 months, and then you actually have to go to court to prove that you provided them the services. So these things actually happen, which freaked me out. I was like, no, seriously? Like 6 months after you provided the services, they can retract this kind of money? And then actually it happened to also like a friend of mine. It's like, yeah, you hear crazy stories once you start going into that journey. But that's the problem. You can't be too cautious. Otherwise, you won't do anything. You need to just act and provide services and assume that people have the best thing in mind. But
I never heard of that before.
Yeah, I didn't mean to freak you out.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's great.
Just part of the
it's
risk, yeah.
different people optimize for different things in life. I've heard some people say, like, I want to make as much money as possible. I've heard some people say, I want to spend as much time with my family as possible. I've heard some people say those two can be the same thing. Those two can come together. I've also heard people say, I want to be able to tell the best stories. And like, yeah, I hope I can tell a story like that, because this is the kind of noise, right? When you just turn up the data volume enough, you just have all these cases. I hope that my consulting company grow big enough that I have a case where somebody retracts a payment. As funny as that might sound, that seems like a great story to be able to tell. I don't really want to go to court, but yeah, it's true. It's true. Like, dude, it's just crazy. There's one client, one of my favorite clients. I don't even have a contract with him or with his company. It's just like all pretty much handshake, no NDA, no contract. And then similarly, he's like, he pays me an upfront fee. And then he's like, oh, we'll take care of the rest at the end. And then I have the total opposite extreme of that, where it's like everything about what is going to be built and how it's going to be built needs to be in like the engagement section of the contract, like 2-month-long negotiations just to get all this wording right. You can really...
Did you see a pattern? Is it like the earlier the startup is, the less the people, is more like less like handshaking kind of contracting?
So I'm not really working with startups. I've done one engagement with a startup, but mostly it's like this small to medium-sized business that's doing different stuff. I can imagine if I was a startup, I would probably be a bit more like picky about, contract stuff, because there's just IP on the line. Also, if you have funding, then you probably have investors who are connecting you with lawyers who will just write these contracts for you. And it's like just no extra cost to them really to have some contract with an independent contractor or an independent consultant, some third party. But no, I've had like very few handshake deals. Most of them are some sort of contract. Even though I don't really work with startups. Well, what about you?
So at the moment it's kind of like startups, but I'm not doing this full time, by the way. So when I decide to do this full time, I want to kind of target, as you said, small to mid-sized businesses, but I'm still in the phase of figuring out which direction I should go. What am I trying to offer? So now I feel like I can do everything, but that's also like a bad thing, because that means you're not really specialized in one thing. So I'm still in the discovery phase.
That's great.
Which is fun, because then you see the potential, but then sometimes it's frustrating because you're moving slow on so many different areas that makes you feel like you're stuck. So it's going through sometimes doubts and all this kind of stuff, which I think is normal in this journey.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've had maybe 2 blog posts right now that are just been sitting in a 70% complete state for maybe like 3 months. But that's good, like you're really blessed that you have so many ideas, so many things you want to do. And the difficult thing is to choose exactly what to focus on. That's a great position to be in. I think that, I feel similarly, by the way. I think that it's a really blessed position to be in, and it's one I'm really grateful for. But yeah, I think also there is a time for niching, or there's a time for focusing, and there's a time for diversifying. And it's not always clear to me when you're supposed to do which, because there's also this piece of like the portfolio career. I saw this guy I follow on Instagram, I think, and he's like, I just made enough money from my Instagram account to quit my 9-to-5. However, my entire Instagram account is about like how 9-to-5 sucks. So if I leave it, and it's funny, but it's like he's like, so how can I quit? It doesn't make sense. So it's just funny that it's a funny anecdote, but there is this thing where it's like, when you can set these things up right, they can all feed into each other. I mean, and I see a lot of people in this space, in this space in particular, who do this really well. I think Seattle Data Guy is one of them. I think Shaw's a really good example of this, where you just kind of you have your consulting work, and that generates case studies and also courses. And then those case studies generate leads, and it generates social proof for the people who are going to join your course. And then the people who are joining your course, there's also your blog, and all this stuff, they actually add to each other rather than kind of take away. And I think it's hard. I think it takes a lot of work to get there, and also just a lot of volume. Like writing a LinkedIn post can take up to an hour. A good LinkedIn post can take up to an hour. Writing a good blog post for me can take, I don't know, at least 20 hours, usually more, especially if there's some actual data science or some actual code involved. It can take much longer than that. This stuff is no joke. So you just have to get it to a high volume. And I think it's also you also got to hire out stuff. That's the only way, because you just have to basically buy back your time a little bit so you can do other stuff. I don't know. It's tricky.
Why are you doing this, by the way? Why did you decide to go the whole agency route, being business owner? And
good question. I mean, there's a few answers to that. So the medium length answer is just always wanted to, really. I always had ideas and things I was excited about, so many side projects. I think a lot of people maybe experience this, where it's the side projects just, they just stay in a GitHub repo, 40%, half baked or whatever it is. And that always was just a bummer to me. And there's so many ideas I had that, that other people ended up, making, or that the time has passed, for example, 5 years ago, I really wanted to make a language learning application. And I think that AI has changed the landscape so much of translating. Also, the motivation for learning languages is now less, I'd say, that I'm not sure that in this current landscape that it would fit. And that's, maybe you could say that that's a good thing, right? Oh, I didn't invest all this time and energy into building this thing. But I see it as a bad thing. Not as a bad thing, but it's the world around us is shaped by people who built stuff like that, and it just became super popular. I mean, every day I'm at least once a week, I think to myself, man, thank you, Steve Jobs. Without the advent of personal computing with this MacBook, what would I do? This is my primary way I feel so creative, so self-expressive behind a laptop. And it's because of this huge part of the world that he created. And I could have played a small part in creating that part of the language learning world, and that ship has sailed. And that's a bummer to me. I don't know. I've just had so many of these ideas, and I don't know, maybe I'm being it's maybe the negative perspective. I just always wanted to, basically. That said, I had a really hard time taking the leap. I think I found it really scary, frankly. Back in November, I was at Delivery Hero, or I had decided to leave Delivery Hero back in November. Well, my wife was pregnant at the time also. I was I really want to try out freelancing. I think I have some momentum here from one or two clients. I can really use this to kickstart things. And I didn't really have quite the courage, I'd say. And I was a bit nervous about doing that when we had basically a baby on the way. And then I joined a startup company as the founding engineer. And then I was there from November 16th, then December, January, February, and then I got laid off. Yeah, it was the second time that's happened where I was I want to switch to full-time entrepreneurship, but there's this cool startup opportunity that really suits me. I'll go for that rather. I'll get the entrepreneurial itch out of me at this startup, and then I get laid off. So being the second time that this happened, and also the thing was, this startup was also my really my dream job. Frankly, it was in logistics. It was in address intelligence, home addresses, geospatial data. This was really I'd been working in this stuff in Delivery Hero for a couple of years, and it's super interesting. There's a whole history of addresses. Every country does this stuff so differently. It's really fascinating. Yeah, it was really the dream job, and then the dream job really in retrospect just wasn't that good. And I was I think this is just about as good as a job is going to get for me. And I had a few things coming, and I was I'm just going to go for it. I think also my dad started his business at the same time that his first child was born. And I was people do this all the time. Whatever. It'll be fine. And I had enough savings in the bank, thankfully, that it was pretty okay to take that risk. And man, I hope I never go back to a job. Let's say that. I mean, you never know. Life is long, life is short, but also life is long. Who knows? Maybe there really is that dream job. I see people who have stuff in entrepreneurship go back to employment and be very happy about it. So, maybe that might happen. I'm of course open to that. But yeah, so it's just one of those cases, frankly, where a decision that I had been trying to make for a couple of years was just made, in my eyes, was made for me. And I couldn't be happier. Sometimes life just works out nicely that way.
It does, huh? And probably at the moment you were like, oh, why this happened? Like you don't even know that it might have actually been the best thing that ever happened to you.
I was actually when I got laid off, I was actually like, it's always like, I think my wife was stressed out. I don't know. It's like in movies, right?
Yeah.
Like you come home
we
and
have a child on the way.
Your pregnant wife is like sitting on the couch. I'm like, honey, I lost my job. No, what are we going to do? So that was a bit of a stress, I would say. But no, from the minute it happened, I was like, there's no going back. I was pretty excited, honestly. Yeah, I was pretty excited, like even 24, 48 hours afterwards. It's been a good time so far. It's been crazy. It's been a big
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So
yeah,
nice.
It's funny how this life goes.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because that's exactly what I'm at the moment. So when you're describing the situation, I can see my timeline going because right now I want to start this agency, but at the same time, there are some really interesting founding engineer opportunities that I'm currently talking with, whether it's a CTO or a founding AI engineer or something like that. We'll see. Maybe if we can have another chat in a couple months and see how this thing turned out for me as well. Looking at the time, actually, wow, we're already way over the line. First of all, thank you so much for this conversation. I didn't even feel the time. It went really, really quick. Unfortunately, we have to stop. But yeah, this content is super valuable, especially for people trying to go into entrepreneurship, what to expect. It's always going to be a bumpy ride. It's always going to be this anxiety, anxiousness, confusion. So thank you for being so honest with us and showcasing what to expect as well. And Ben, congratulations for what you accomplished so far and wish you the best for the future as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Serop. Thank you for having me. It was really nice to meet you, and I hope to meet you in person in Berlin at your Founders Running Club. I'm pretty excited for that.
Oh, awesome. Yes, please do join us.
Yeah, it's a bit cold here. I actually just bought a new pair of running shoes.
Oh, amazing.
New pair. It's actually my 9th pair of the same shoe. I just love these shoes. But anyway, pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for having me. Great also learning about your experience and the decisions that you're currently facing, how you're running business. So yeah, definitely looking forward to meeting up again and back in Berlin and just hearing more about your story as well. So yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, talk to you soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. Take care.
Well, thanks. Bye-bye.